everyone, I'm Didem and I'm a PhD candidate in Information and Systems Engineering at Concordia University, and today I'm recording a short talk for you for week 9 of the course Studies in Literature and Science. Okay, so I want to start with a widely studied topic, genomic privacy. The amount of data gathered at online genealogy services is huge. These services perform DNA profiling and DNA testing. People sign up for these websites and they willingly share their DNA with these companies. In most of these services, customers provide a saliva sample to the company and the company provides the customers with health-related results like susceptibility for a certain disease or with information about ancestry. By the start of 2019, 26 million people's DNA are in the services listed in the slide. Henrietta Lacks' case is one of the most known cases in genomic privacy. She was diagnosed with cervical cancer and her cells taken from her tumor biopsy are cultured for medical research. Later, the resulting cell line is called HeLa. Her family's consent was not taken before this procedure and they learned about the cell line's existence much later. A concern about this procedure is expressed by one of her grandchildren, as you can see in this slide. In addition to the problem regarding consent in this case, the DNA also gives information about relatives of Lacks. Sharing her genetic information also reveals genetic information of her children and grandchildren. The problems about privacy become even worse due to DNA's nature. Let's look at some definitions. Personally identifiable information is a type of data that can be used, maybe also with other data, to potentially identify an individual. Some common examples are name, social security number, date, and place of birth. Genome data is also considered as PII along with other biometric data like fingerprints. Data privacy is concerned with the governance of collection, storage, use, and analysis of data and properly handling these steps. It is about making sure that the data is not accessed in an unauthorized way and also about enabling individuals to have control over their own data. There is a common misconception about privacy that if you aren't doing anything wrong, what do you have to hide? But it is not about hiding the wrong, it is a basic right. I really like the title of this article that I cited here in the slide, as it captures the fact that how DNA has a different nature than other type of data. Compare DNA with credit card. If you think that your credit card information is used by other people to do purchases, you can simply call your bank, cancel it, and receive a new card, right? Well, your DNA cannot be changed. Once it is analyzed and some unique characteristics about you are inferred, you can't do the same thing that you have done for your credit card. Also, with the advancements in genomics, we know more about what our DNA tells us. DNA data also discloses close relatives, which results in involuntary sharing. There is also a risk of genetic discrimination. Genetic data can be used against people. For instance, insurance companies may deny people of insurance, or people may be rejected of a long-term loan if a person is likely to get a chronic disease and die before they would repay the loan. And there can be some people who get the control of a database of genomic data and they threaten to revoke access or post the sensitive information online unless they receive some ransom in exchange for the data that they took the control. Or there may be the case where an employer asks for a genetic test and you may end up learning a fact like susceptibility for a certain disease that you do not intend to learn about. There are many cases like these, and I'll be happy to talk about them in more detail during our live session. Let's look at another definition. Anonymization means removing personally identifiable information. This can be done by masking, generalizing, or deleting identifiers so that you cannot determine identifiable information in the data. Studies show that an individual's genetic information can be taken out from the genetic data that is pooled and that is considered to be anonymous. Using some additional data, researchers showed that they can easily identify people in the set. They give an example of using a certain type of genetic markers that is passed from father to son and some additional demographic information to re-identify the people. As we have seen in the incident in the previous slide, the act of identifying an individual to whom the data belong by also using publicly available data is called de-anonymization. It basically means re-identifying data, and the increasing and constant collection of different types of data facilitates this process. Before I continue with the next section, there are some important takeaways. Genetic non-discrimination is an important concern in this area, and genomic data definitely needs legal protection. Genetic literacy is another important concept to show everyone what is at stake when they share their DNA information online or provide genetic testing to an employer. DNA is always sensitive, and hence it requires long-term solutions. Now let's have a look at algorithms and models. I will give you some examples from this book, Weapons of Math Destruction by Cathy O'Neil. She worked as an academic and then in the finance industry, where she saw the financial system crashing down, and there she realized how math is entangled with the world's problems. So here's another definition. A model is an abstract representation of some process. She gives an informal example from her own life. As a mother, she models her meals according to everyone's appetites in the family. And she also gives another basic model from baseball. This is a transparent model, as the data about baseball games is open to everyone, and more or less everyone knows how the inferences are made. But some other models are like black boxes, which means that you just put in the data, get the result, but you don't know what happened in between. In these two quotations from the book, she mentions the fact that human influence on these models cannot be denied. It is highly likely that human prejudice, misunderstanding, and bias are also coded into the model. So models are not simply numbers and equations. That is why she mentions that models are opinions embedded in mathematics. And what seems like all numbers and equations in fact represent humans and like maybe their belongings. Again, she's referring to her experience in her finance industry, where she states that the numbers that she's using to create her models were in fact people's retirement funds and mortgages. That's why she says like finally everyone realized that there are people on the other side of the algorithms. So in this specific case, she talks about rankings performed for educational excellence. These rankings are produced by an algorithm which is basically like an opinion formalized in code. And the rankings are self-reinforcing, meaning that a college ranked badly would lose more reputation, and conversely it would favor the privileged. And as a result, these rankings become somehow like a destiny. And these models cannot take everything into account. They look at SAT scores, student-teacher ratios, and acceptance rates maybe, but they can't measure learning, happiness, confidence, and friendship. And as a result, it forces everyone to shoot for the exact same goal. And there's another thing she mentions in her book, that every ranking system can be gamed just to create a different feedback loop to get a different result. Okay, so let's move on to another case, which is about predatory ads. So here is a famous cartoon from New Yorker in 1993, and in the caption it writes, "On the internet, nobody knows you're a dog," which generally states the fact that you can be whoever you want to be on the internet. And it is the opposite today. We are ranked, categorized, and scored in hundreds of models on the basis of our preferences and according to certain patterns. And as she says, vulnerability is worth gold, because some models are just used to sell people in need false and overpriced promises. They find inequalities and take advantage of them. And the worst thing is that these campaigns are opaque, and the targets of these ads do not know this. For instance, if a person is in need of money, they suddenly see ads about loans. And let's finish this section with a definition of machine learning. So an algorithm finds patterns on its own, and then through time it connects them with outcomes in machine learning. In a sense, it learns. However, models may suffer from biases. Like, imagine a model that learned from a current state of customers may not be able to make predictions for another set of customers with different expectations. Okay, now let's look what happens when we convert our everyday life into data. So in this book entitled Self-Tracking, the authors try to find an answer to the question how and why people record, analyze, and reflect on data about themselves. And they want to show how data can be useful, powerful, tedious, pleasurable, underwhelming, and wrong. We can perform self-directed tracking of different types of data, like hours slept, steps walked, or maybe the followers gained in a social media. And there's a certain path the data follows during self-tracking. You first collect, synthesize them, then analyze them, and you reflect on the data that you have gathered. However, there can be some challenges at each step, like how you can collect the data that you want, or how you integrate them, and also setting aside some time to reflect on data is another concern. We are tracked with or without our consent, and our private data connects us to a wider social system via this virtual and, in fact, somehow partial version of ourselves. We can call this a data double that is living on these servers. And our data has also a social life as it aggregates with other data and it is like under analysis in combination with other types of data. Self-tracking is a way to interpret the self, but these recommendations may become authoritative. And these systems may create all these questions as you try to fit into a model to be, in quotation marks, normal, but this model may not even be idealized or optimized for you. Collecting significant amount of data about our health and well-being seems empowering, but it is also overwhelming as it shifts the healthcare labor to you, as you have to figure out how to analyze your data, hoping to receive a meaningful interpretation in the end. In this quotation, which is not from the book, an evolutionary genetics professor mentions that the results presented by genetic testing companies are often too general to be of real value. And as it is stated in the book that you are not even sure whether it helps you to make sense of the situation or the rich data goes off to someone else while you get an unhelpful number. The data collected ends up being more important to the companies rather than you. And there's this statement that if you are not paying for it, you became the product. And it is again related to the concept of self as commodity. And most of these services need more and more data from us to improve performance and offer better services. But we also know from the social networks that the data collected is used for targeted advertising. And finally, in this section, I want to present you the point of view of this book about privacy. So what makes the data private depends on its context. The people and institutions that surround the data contribute to the decision whether the data is considered as private. As both you and the company contribute to the creation in the case of self-tracking, the ownership is also complicated in this case. It is defined as more like a kinship, as it is not created by one party. It is like both a market commodity and a non-marketable child, as this data wouldn't be there if both you and the company didn't contribute to this process. So at the end of my presentation, I want to present you a list of sources that is not exhaustive if you want to discover more. I'm looking forward to have a discussion with you and answer your questions in the live session.